Okay. Hello. Ow. Okay. Yes, I love you all. I love everyone. I love you all so much. Can we give me some breathing room? Why do you wait until my mouth is open? Why do you wait until my guard is down and my mouth is open? And you're like, this is my opportunity. Let's touch tongues. Ugh, Jesus Christmas and Santa Claus, that was intimate. Hi kids, welcome back to another pizza party. I'm Mrs. Pizza. There's Weenie and there's Cheese. They're intertwined currently. I'm pretty sure Cheese is probably taking those very sharp puppy teeth and biting precious and patient Winnie, because that's what she does. Today, we are here to talk about some of my recent reads, because even though I still claim to be in a reading slump, I've read a bunch of books. And if we don't start talking about them now, by the time it's time to recap, I'm going to have read them so long ago that I won't remember anything about them, because my brain does not hold information for long periods of time. It says no thank you and just deletes, just alt delete, just deletes all of that nonsense as quick as possible. So let's talk about my recent reads, right? Oh my gosh, did you rip a chunk of fur off of Weenie? Is this yours? Do you want it back? There you go. You can wear it as a toupee. Is this just what we're going to do? This is what we're going to do. It's going great. We're doing great. I'm not quite sure what's happening right now. Ow! How do you have this much energy? The first book that we're going to talk about is City of Nightmares by Rebecca Schaffer. I read this book, or picked this book up, because the opening sentence or the opening chapter for that matter, and the synopsis all basically said that our main character, whose name is Ness, years ago, her sister turned into a giant spider and killed everybody in the house except Ness. Ness survived. In this world that Ness lives in, which is called, the city she lives in is called Mayhem, and basically some sort of magical illness, is what I'm going to call it, exists in this world where when you fall asleep and you have a nightmare, you turn into that nightmare. So you go to bed at night and you dream about giant spiders, and then you wake up in the morning and you are a giant spider and you proceed to kill everyone around you. So the society has put things in place to help this out, because it would just take a matter of weeks for the entire society to completely crumble. So there is different medications that you take, and certain things are illegal, such as drinking, because they dilute or negate the effects of the medicine. I do not know what your deal is today, ma'am, but I need you to not hurt your sister. Hey, do you need to leave the room so Winnie and I can have a moment's peace? Cheesy! We'll give you a moment's rest from the craziness that is the baby, because she's at an 11. And you're an old lady, and sometimes you need a break, you know? She hurts Weenie, because she's like, Weenie can take it. But sometimes Weenie can't take it. Cheese has been sequestered in the other room because she's at an 11 right now. She's not alone. Mr. Pizza's in there with her. But she is tormenting the Winnie nonstop today because, one, she's a puppy. And we were able to only go on one big walk today. So she's, chaos. But two, we have people working on the yard. So I think that she is her life has been disrupted. And so she must disrupt, All right. What was I talking about? Okay. So in this book, City of Nightmares, the tone that you are given in the synopsis sounds like it's going to be gruesome and scary and fantasy. In the opening chapter, you learn pretty quickly with our main character, Ness, and her best friend, Priya. They are attending I'm going to call it funeral, but memoriam, of a man that has recently been executed because he went to bed at night, and when he woke up in the morning, he was a nightmare. And he was a violent nightmare. Now, in this world, not all nightmares are immediately killed on sight. Some people turn into things but still retain their consciousness. Some people turn into things and murder their whole family. It really depends on the nightmare. But Priya and Ness have entered this apartment to basically provide pamphlets for the cult that they are a member of to the recently deceased widow. I don't know if the tense on that was correct. The man who died, his widow. So The slapstick, over-the-top action starts immediately in the first chapter, but the tone is very early on set as kind of dark comedy, which was something I was not expected, but pleasantly surprised with at first. As the book went on, though, only in the beginning, it was like 70% of the jokes were landing. By the end of it, 20 to 30% of the jokes were landing with me. And it took me a while to pinpoint the tone of this book. It was very, I kept saying like Adult Swim, adult cartoon. Some of these things, the nightmares were over the top. The violence came out of nowhere and was very over the top. But a lot of the jokes were kind of like slapsticky or just very, for lack of a better way of putting it, stupid. I also felt like the author got on a lot of soapboxes. There was a lot of really telegraphed messages, and there was things that you absolutely know how the author feels about those things. That's not necessarily the worst, and it wasn't that I disagreed with these messages per se, but it felt heavy-handed, and it was just like, oh, okay, well, I know you're not a big fan of alcohol, then. Oh, okay. That seems like a weird stance to be taking. Okay. And it was a lot of like, you could have just left it as, in this world, this thing can't happen because of X, Y, and Z, and moved on. But it felt like we really harped on a lot of things. Again, totally fine. I think that's kind of what being an author is like using writing as a way to work through things, talk about issues. That's just... Are you going to sing us a song of your people? Needless to say, I wasn't the biggest fan of this book. I ended up, I believe, giving it like a 2.5 stars on Goodreads and passed it on pretty quickly to the next person. I don't think I would pick anything up from this author again because I think it was the writing style and not necessarily like even the voice of the author that was the problem. It was the writing style for me and the humor. We obviously do not have the same sense of humor, which is fine. I think this is going to be a series, but obviously I will not be continuing. The next two books I picked up after that were actually from the Victorian Prizefighter series, and this is by Alice Coldbreath. This is not something that I would usually gravitate towards, but I had recently read a book that had a ridiculous and unnecessary third act breakup, and a lot of my friends on Goodreads came to the rescue and gave me a bunch of recommendations for books that didn't have third act breakups, or I should say romances that didn't have third act breakups. There's plenty of books that don't have third act breakups if they don't even have relationships in them, but that's neither here nor there. So I picked up the first two books in the series, and that was A Bride for the Prizefighter and A Substitute Wife for the Prizefighter. These are historical novels, and before you get all weird about it, because I think it's very strange that some people have very, very strong feelings about historical romances. But did you watch Bridgerton? Did you watch it? Did you like it? Then you like historical romances, I'm sorry. And those aren't even really the best historical romances. If you watched it and you liked it like everybody did, you would like historical romances. I actually really liked these because instead of focusing on the aristocracy and regency, kings, queens, dukes, viscounts, all of the different ones where I don't really understand how they work, but I know that they're fancy. This was more focused on the more everyday man. They're prize fighters, the main male characters in these stories, and their love interests come from different backgrounds. Our first book, The Wife for the Prizefighter, the Bride for the Prizefighter, excuse me, I actually really enjoyed. It is the story of Mina. She is a young woman whose father has recently passed away, and she has grown up her whole life living in this school that her father and mother ran. Her mother has long since passed away, so Mina is alone in the world when she finds out that she has a relative she didn't know existed. This relative comes, scoops her out of the only life she's ever known because she's completely destitute now, because back then it wasn't like she could do anything other than be a governess or some sort of maid or housekeeper, and she had used the majority of the last little bit of money they had to try and cure her father of the illness that eventually took his life. So Mina goes with this new family member a little bit reluctantly, and through circumstances ends up being wed off to a prizefighter who also owns a local tavern, and his name is William Nye, and he is the grumpiest and curmudgeoniest of all people. He is gruff and big and burly, and Mina is very prim and proper and laced up very, very tight, having grown up in a school setting, in a school for the education of young women. So, of course, it was very prim and proper. Mina just gets kind of dumped on William Nye, and the two of them slowly have feelings for each other. It wasn't a grumpy sunshine. It was a grumpy and a not grumpy. I don't know what that is called. A grump and a not grump, which is not a trope. But sometimes I feel like grumpy sunshine gets thrown around too. She's not a sunshine. She's a prim and proper person, and he's more rough around the edges. This book was a lot of fun. One, because you're spending a lot of time in a tavern doing everyday chores, what it's like to be someone of the lower classes, or I guess the middle classes, during the Victorian period. You meet a lot of the other prize fighters, which eventually you know there will be books about. And guess what? No third act breakup. There is drama that happens in the third act, and there's definitely interesting things going on, but there is no third act breakup, which is all I really wanted. It's all I really wanted. The second book in this series was actually the one that I actually enjoyed it more than the first, and that is The Substitute Wife for the Prizefighter. This is the story of Lizzie. She, once again, has grown up in a slightly more upper class than our prizefighter household. She's living in the house of her aunt and uncle and her cousin is engaged to a wealthy prizefighter by the name of Benedict. He's made his way in the world, earned his fortune from nothing, and he is engaged to Lizzie's cousin. Well, one night at a dinner party, Lizzie sees something that she can't ignore, and when everybody else turns a blind eye or plays naive or just decides not to believe the truth, Lizzie can't help herself. She has to tell the truth, even though it has dire consequences to her. Lizzie finds herself without a home, kind of cast out, because she is telling the truth, and through circumstances ends up under the care of Benedict. This one had a really, really great setting. I won't tell you because it's kind of a spoiler, but it's really cool. The tavern was really fun in the first book, but I really liked the setting more in this book. Just the slice of life stuff that you wouldn't know about the Victorian period, and kind of how different this is from a usual historical romance. Instead of it all being about the ton and dances and, holding hands in the garden, this is a very, very different existence from those people, but still historical. It's still really cool, and I really, really enjoyed this. I just powered through this book so fast. If you are the least bit interested in historical romances, especially historical romances that don't have dukes and viscounts and princes and whatnot, which those are fun and fine, but every once in a while it's fun to get something completely different, and I really enjoyed these. And I wouldn't say I'm someone that usually gravitates towards historical romances, but I loved it. I loved it. And no third act breakups. The next book I picked up after that one was Leviathan Song by Elsie Winters. Again, from the list of no third act breakup romances. Really, this is just turning to, hey, do you hate a third act breakup in your romance novel? Does it make you really frustrated when it's a lack of communication and immaturity that causes them to break up in the third act just so they can get together again right before the end of the book? And you're so stinking tired of it? Try these books. Because I did, and I loved them. And it also was nice knowing there was going to be a different drama than the same old drama. Have I harped on how much I hate third act breakups enough? In case you were wondering. I don't like third act breakups. Anyways, Leviathan Song. This is the story of Alara. She is a elf-human mix. I said half elf, half human. I think she's like 3/4 elf, because I think her mom is half elf, half human. But that is not important. Those are details that you do not need. Anyways, Alara lives in Seattle. I will say about these books, I've actually read the first two. I might as well talk about the second one as well, which is Mayhem and Magpies. Magpies and Mayhem, I believe. Let's talk about Leviathan's Song first. So Leviathan's Song is Alara. She lives in Seattle. And in these books, there's a world building that I like to say is similar to Crescent City. You are dealing with people that live in a modern city with modern things such as cell phones and cars and all of those things, but it's also taking place in an urban fantasy setting. So in this world, you have portals within the city of Seattle that will take you to different fantasy locations. In this world, people that have enough magic in their blood or are like Alara, part elf, part human, you can travel both to what they call the Void, which is Seattle, the non-magic side of things, or you can travel through these portals to magical places. If you have too much magic in your blood, you can't come into the Void. It's dangerous for you. You need the magic to survive. And humans cannot travel to the magic places because they won't make it through the portals. Too much magic. But you have characters like Alara that can live in both worlds. In this book, Alara, one day walking down the street, encounters a siren named Levi, short for Leviathan. These two end up having an immediate connection, but through circumstances actually kind of keep bumping into each other. Now, Alara has a very powerful type of magic that has caught the eye of some shady characters, and she's in some need of protecting. Drama ensues. This was really sweet. I really liked the world that was built here, and I really liked both of the main characters, but you also love all of the side characters. In the second book, which is Magpies and Mayhem, you have Alara's best friend, who is a magpie shifter, and she has a history with one of Levi's roommates, whose name is Jordan, I believe, and he is a vampire. Now, he hasn't always been a vampire, and he's not excited about being a vampire. And our magpie shifter, also known as Sydney, when she was a gangly teenage kid, you all know, all knees and elbows and, probably had braces. She had a huge major crush on her older brother's best friend, who just happened to be Jordan. But many, many years have passed. Jordan has gone through something horrific and ended up a vampire. And Sydney obviously isn't a tiny little weird kid with a crush anymore. She is got a lot of boundary issues, and Jordan has a lot of boundaries, but for some reason, it's not irritating. It works. There's a little bit of push and pull. In this one, there's also a baby dragon. There's a baby dragon. I could just read a book about a baby dragon, but there's a baby dragon in this. It also had an ending that I was actually pretty excited about. I didn't see it going there, and I wondered how they were going to kind of resolve some of the issues that were brought up, but I loved it. I loved these two books. The next book in the series, the title has been announced, but I don't know when it's coming out, but it is Seduction of a Psychopomp, Erogenous Handholding, and Other Ways to Tame Your Reaper. There's also a novella in this series, and the characters from the novella do show up in both Leviathan's Song and Magpies and Mayhem, but you don't have to have read the novella to start the story. I would read Leviathan's Song first because you are introduced to the characters in the second book, in the first book. The novella I don't think is on Kindle Unlimited, and that's why I skipped it, but both of these first two books are on Kindle Unlimited. At least they were last time I checked. So, you got Kindle Unlimited? You got a fantasy romance on your TBR now. Just letting you know. The next book I picked up after that was Stardust by Neil Gaiman. I actually bought this book because I love the cover. And I have the corresponding cover to Neverwhere. These covers are illustrated by Robert McGinnis. And even though I don't know much about him, look at that. Look at that cover. Phenomenal. This is the story of Tristan. He is a young man who lives in a town named Wall, and he has a crush on the most beautiful girl in town. Well, one day, Tristan, while he's talking to this girl, they see a star fall in the sky. Now, Tristan says he's going to go retrieve this fallen star for his lady love, but here's the hitch. The reason the town that he lives in is called Wall is because there is literally a wall that divides Wall from a mystical land full of magic, and there are always guards on the wall to not let anybody out and not let anybody in except for one time a year when there's a great big festival. So Tristan has to find a way to get over the wall into this magical land and return with a fallen star. Now, this book I had also picked up because I really enjoyed the movie, and I don't remember when it came out, but it stars Claire Danes and Robert De Niro and Michelle Pfeiffer and a bunch of other people. And if you haven't watched the movie, I highly recommend it. Go pick it up. Go watch it. It's got to be somewhere. Find it on some streaming service. It is there. Here is something that I have never ever said before. The movie's better than the book. I know, it kind of burns to say it. It's not something that a reader, I think, usually loves to say. The book was fine. The movie makes it better. Some of the things that don't work in the book or are unnecessary in the book are completely cut out in the movie. This had a lot of things that the movie changed for the better, if that makes any sense. I liked Tristan better in the movie. I liked Yvain better in the movie. Robert De Niro's character is more important in the movie. If you love the movie, don't read the book. If you've read the book, watch the movie. It's better. It's better. That's all I have to say about that. The next book I picked up after that one was A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, and that is by Sarah Hawley. I picked this up. This is a debut kind of paranormal fantasy novel because it looked super cute. And it was cute. But I DNF'd it. And I've had some friends on Goodreads since read it. They had a good time with it. No one's giving this incredibly bad reviews, and I'm not either. It was really, really cute. I just didn't connect with it, and there were some problems I had with some of the stuff that was going on, but I think that's debut novel kind of stuff. Let me tell you what the story's about. So in this book, you have our character Muriel, who is a witch who comes from a family of very powerful witches, but Muriel is seen as kind of the outcast witch. She has very, very strong nature magic, but that's not something that is looked on as a positive thing. It's kind of nature magic is seen as lesser by these witches. So her family wants her to practice other forms of magic. So one day, Muriel is trying to conjure up something, and she accidentally summons a demon into her kitchen, and his name is Ozroth. Now, demons make soul bargains, and Muriel has accidentally summoned Oz for a soul bargain, but she doesn't want to give up her soul. It was all an accident, and Oz can't leave until a soul bargain has been struck. So these two have a forced proximity thing happening. Also, Muriel doesn't want to let everyone know that she once again failed at a great big spell. And so to kind of make an excuse for Oz always being around, she tells everybody they're dating. So it's a fake dating, forced proximity, demon, witch romance in a fun little town full of magical creatures. It wasn't my favorite. And I can't really explain to you why without giving a lot away about the plot. It's not bad. It just wasn't great. There was a lot of characters that were like over the top evil, and you're just wondering like, wow, why is everybody, it was literally everyone's mom was evil. Like everyone had an evil mom. Also, there was a lot of stuff where like, I don't even really know how city planning works, but a lot of it felt off. The big kind of dramas in the story just didn't really work for me. I also felt like maybe it was because I was in a reading slump, so I don't want to turn anybody off to the story that is just so excited to read it. But I didn't really have a great time with it. I think I would read more from this author when they're a couple more books deep. But it felt like a lot of it was a lack of subtlety in a lot of things. A lot of things were just hitting you over the head with exactly what the author wanted you to be thinking or feeling, and not trusting in the reader to pick up on things, which is also kind of the problem I had with City of Nightmares. I just don't like when authors think the reader's stupid. And I'm not saying that either one of those authors think the reader's stupid, but they don't also think that we're that smart, you know? The last book we're going to talk about is a book I picked up in my pursuit of being a classics girly, because I just want to, I think I say this in every single video, but I'm trying to go back and reread classic literature, whether that means classic literature is and things you would take and read required reading in your literary classes, whether that be middle school, high school, college. Also backlist items that I probably should have read by now, but I haven't. I'm just trying to be a well-versed reader. And it really hasn't gone that great so far. Until Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Look at, I even like tabbed that nonsense. Look at, she's a real reader. This was my first book by any of the Bronte sisters. I don't think I've read this before. With some of these classics, when I get into them a little bit, I'm like, I think I've read this before. I will also say I didn't really know the story of Jane Eyre before this, but as I was reading it, I think we've all been spoiled at some point. And I was like, oh, I think I know what's going to happen. I bet that took away from the reading experience a little bit, but I really stinking enjoyed this. I will say the first half, or part 1 of this book, was far superior to part 2. But this is gothic and dark and sad. Poor Jane is an orphan that was being brought up by her aunt in a house where her uncle adopted her, brought her in, and then swiftly passed away. So she's stuck with her aunt and her cousins, and they're all awful. They are so awful, all of them, especially her one cousin. Well, her aunt's pretty awful too. Anyways, Jane has a very sad start to life and then ends up being shipped off to a very strict and not so great boarding school where she lives the next, I think it's like 8 or 10 years of her life. It's not all awful while she's there, but some pretty sad and horrible things happen to Jane while she's there too. Then at the end of her tenure at this school, when she's graduated and become a teacher of her own, she then takes on a new job as a governess at a very secluded and fancy manor. And while she's there, she meets the owner of our big gothic scary mansion, and the two of them have a little bit of a love connection, even though, like, looking at this through the 2023 lens, like, it's a little creepy. Like, he looks at her like she's some magical creature, but also he, like, makes comments about how young she is, and you're like, oh, it was a different time. It was a different time. The first part of the book is so good. There's suspense, there's mystery happening, but nobody really, like, Jane is hopping to conclusions that totally would make sense if you weren't really paying, well, not even if you weren't really paying attention. If you're a normal, rational human being, the conclusions that she comes to, even though they turn out to not always be true, make sense. Jane is strong and just doesn't fit into the world that she's currently living in, or the time that she's currently living in. She has opinions, and she's strong-willed, and she's smart, and that's just not what people wanted women to be during this time period. This is great and readable. The only thing I really would say slowed me down the most was there's a lot of French in here, and I don't speak French, so I had to do a lot of Google translating. But I tabbed and highlighted so many damn things in this book because it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful, and I have a beautiful copy of it, and I loved it. Look at me. I'm a classics girly, you know? I'll take your applause now. Thank you. Yes, thank you. I'm very smart. I know. But that, kids, is where we're going to stop this most recent reads, because 8 is a good number. My phone is blowing up. Literally no one has texted me today. And now while I'm recording, everyone's like, let's send her pictures of our cat. Which, yes, always send me a picture of your cat. But still, that is going to be the end of this recent reads. I hope you're reading good books out there, wherever you are. And I'll see you next time.